Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Engage Arlington virtual learning series. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell, and I'm here tonight with Arlington County Board Chair Katie Cristol, Arlington County Manager Mark Schwartz, and Director of Arlington Economic Development, Victor Hoskins. We're here tonight to provide you with some information about Amazon's announcement to have a major new headquarters right here in Arlington. For those of you joining us online tonight, we encourage you to use your chat box to offer some questions for folks here in the studio. And for everyone online, feel free to introduce yourself, let us know your neighborhood or the organization you're involved with. But let's get right to it. Big announcement today. Katie, why don't we start off with you? Tell us what the announcement was and what it means for all of us as Arlingtonians.
Great. So Arlington was pleased today to gather with our partners from Alexandria and certainly from the Commonwealth of Virginia as Amazon announced that they would be bringing 25,000 jobs over the next decade and change here to Arlington County, specifically to the Crystal City, Pentagon City, and Potomac Yard neighborhood. So we had a big day with a lot of conversations with those state partners, with Amazon, but in fact the conversation with our community is just beginning. We know that folks have a lot of questions about the impacts this might bring, both to our tax base for the better, but also in terms of transportation, public schools, and housing. So we had a great conversation to start today, and I'm really looking forward to this kind of town hall tonight, which is the first of a few, so we can really begin that conversation with our community.
Great. Now, Victor, this has been a long process, 14 months to be exact. Walk us through a little bit. What was really involved in this process of competing with communities from around North America, from around the continent, actually?
So I'm going to take us back a bit to September of 2017 when this whole process started. This application came in and basically an RFP really out to any jurisdiction that was interested in competing for, and it was 50,000 jobs over a 15, 20-year period, and about 8 million square feet. That's roughly what the RFP contained. And that sounded like something very exciting for anybody involved in economic development, but particularly a jurisdiction like ours that has been dealing with a vacancy problem. We're at 18% right now, but we've been higher than that in the past, and it's been very difficult to get that number down. And something like this would actually take us a long way. So we talked to the county manager. We told the board, that we wanted to go after this. We kind of explained our strategy. We chose that we decided that this was not going to be a bidding war. This is not how we were going to go about it. So when we talked to the state, they embraced that thought. They said, we feel the same way. So we went forward more with how can we align our strategic assets for the region in a way that would be attractive to a group like Amazon. And we assumed that there would be some kind of short list. When you get so many applications, they got 238 applications. Right. So we assumed that there would be some form of short list. So how could you strategically put yourself in a position where you can get on that short list? And that we managed to do that. And that was really with the leadership of Stephen Murray, who is who's the CEO of Virginia Economic Development Partnership. He and his team really organized really 3 or 4 regions in the state. And helped us put together our application. And that application really kind of set the pace for us because it framed kind of the incentives that we were looking at putting on the table, the type of support we were looking at the table, but more importantly, all the data that they were interested in, because talent was core to what they were trying to achieve, get a nice talent base, an existing talent base, and then grow into the future. So we had to solve that as part of the problem. And then transportation and accessibility was an important one. And then also how do we work interjurisdictionally was very important to them. So those are the things we played on.
And you mentioned the multi-jurisdictional type thing. This is really an unprecedented level of partnership, not just with our neighbors in Alexandria, but for the entire region. Let's talk a little bit about what that really means for economic development.
Well, I think a couple of thoughts. Some of our greatest challenges in Arlington County are regional challenges, and they'll only come with regional solutions. One of the best examples that we've seen over the past year has been metro funding. For a long time, WMATA was the only major rail system in America without a dedicated source of funding that it could rely on for capital improvements. That changed this year with an unprecedented commitment from Maryland, the district, and Virginia state governments to make those contributions and dedicate that funding to shore up the metro system. I suspect that sent a signal to Amazon Amazon that we were ready and willing as a jurisdiction to partner. And in fact, that can only be the beginning. It has to be just the beginning, because the challenges we'll continue to confront and to really realize the benefits of a decision like Amazon choosing to locate here will require regional collaboration. I know one of the top questions on the minds of so many Arlingtonians is housing. Well, we know, for example, based on other major economic development prospects or tenants who've come and located here, that generally only about 15 to 20% of employees live in Arlington County. That doesn't mean we don't need our own strategies to think about housing, particularly committed affordable housing as we grow our workforce, but it also means that we are reliant on the rest of the region to step up and to help as well. So there's been some exciting work happening out of the Council of Governments, which I know our staff are very involved in, that my colleagues and I serve on committees of, to start thinking about how many units of housing this region really needs to add. That was acute before Amazon made this announcement today, and it's even more acute going forward.
Now, I know a lot of the questions that we have coming in this evening, and I know a lot of the questions I heard throughout the day today is when we made this announcement, Amazon was going to be locating in National Landing. And people were saying, I've lived here for years. I've never heard of National Landing. Let's explain to everyone. Mark, why don't you start us off? What is National Landing?
National Landing, and if you go on our website now, we have all the materials that we put together starting last year. We labeled, by we, I mean Arlington and Alexandria went in on a proposal together, and it was a way to avoid saying parts of Arlington, parts of Alexandria.
Doesn't quite roll off
doesn't
the
quite
tongue,
roll
yeah.
off the tongue. So we said National Landing, which consists of Pentagon City, Crystal City, and then Potomac Yards and that portion that's in Alexandria. So all the materials we worked on together, collaboratively, talk about National Landing. Now, I was asked today whether we were taking down the sign for the Crystal City Metro and putting up National Landing. The answer I gave was an unequivocal no. It's still Crystal City, it's still Pentagon City. This is a way to refer to our proposal and the area. So
a little bit, a little bit of both. It encompasses. It's not just Crystal City, which a lot of the rumor mill was attesting to, but Pentagon City, Crystal City, Potomac Yard, one joint brand as opposed to geographical areas, so to speak.
But I think the concern here actually maybe speaks to some of the concerns that Arlingtonians in general are feeling, which is this going to change the community that I love, right? Mm-hmm. And to see something so literal as a potential name change, of course, concern folks. I think one of the things I hope I can communicate on behalf of my colleagues, and I know Mark and Victor and our team share, is we think what made Amazon choose Arlington is the strength of Arlington County. We're not going to go about and change our best foot forward, whether that's the name of one of our valued neighborhoods, our core commitments to planning, our commitments to diversity and sustainability. If anything, we'll be doubling down on those things, and keeping the name and identity of a beloved neighborhood like Crystal City is just the start.
Okay. Well, that's actually a really nice segue to talking about how this really incorporates our own long-term planning here in Arlington, that this was a way to very strategically look at an opportunity and how did it fit with our goals. Let's talk a little bit about how that thought process came together and how we enacted that to Amazon.
So it's interesting. I've been receiving a lot of emails today from former county managers and county employees saying, way to go. And I wrote back to each of them and I said, thank you. Mm-hmm. And they said, no. I said, because beginning in about 2005, when the base realignment and closure process started, which was essentially a real kick to our gut, and it took about 10 years for it to play out, where literally people were streaming out of Crystal City and the office buildings there. Mm-hmm. And so there was a challenge to the then county board and the community to come up with a plan and a vision for Crystal City that would enable it to be revitalized. And that plan was adopted by the county board in 2010, the Crystal City Sector Plan. It's a document that was prescient, I would say, and very hopeful, but actually hadn't borne much fruit for 5 or 6 or 7 years until this project came along. So anything that we're doing right here is consistent with everything that was laid out as part of that conversation. Not just that, and I know that Victor or Katie may want to speak to it, but our plans for transportation in that area, our plans more broadly in the county for transportation, for housing, our plans for schools, all of those are things that we're sticking to the script that's already been discussed with the community. Doesn't mean that we can't have more conversations about it, but I don't want to give us an enormous amount of credit for creativity because we're standing on the shoulders of other people who came up with some of these concepts.
Let's talk about a little bit about what some of those concepts are. What, as we move forward over the next 5, 10, 12 years with this gradual integration of Amazon, what can Arlingtonians expect to see in some of the realizations of these long-term plans?
Well, you know, one of the interesting things that I spoke to a group from Canada last week, and one of the things that we discussed with them were really the way that they develop in Canada in terms of their transportation system and how similar our metro system is to their transportation system. They built high density right on top of station areas, and then they had lower density as you move away from the station areas. And that was one of the things that they found attractive. Actually, this is one of the things that Amazon found attractive. We really have very few systems in the country that can rival our system. We are very hard on it. We have excess capacity right now in Crystal City because 8,000 jobs left there and they haven't returned yet, and we have to get those jobs back. As a matter of fact, Amazon is part of that. But the fact that the planning for that happened 35, almost 40 years ago, that was the brilliance. I mean, that planning, you know, to build high density on the stations, low density around the stations. We have about 90% of all of our commercial property on 14% of the land. Those are powerful drivers for continuing growth. And we have the plan now in place. We just have now a customer and that actually a magnet to draw additional jobs so that we can continue to develop this way. And we're kind of doubling down on transportation if you look at what's going on and the mobility. And then there's some ideas in the future. I mean, obviously we want to connect more fluidly with Alexandria. They're talking about an additional station entrance for one of the stations in Crystal City, and there's talking about an additional entrance for a station in Potomac Yards. So really, we're doubling down on the plans that we've already laid out, and frankly, that are consistent with our values and consistent with the values of Amazon, which is fantastic.
Wonderful. We do want to remind anyone who may be joining us here this evening to send us your questions via Facebook. Just use the chat box on your Facebook feed. And we have one here coming in from Mark on Facebook, asked us about incentives. Obviously a very controversial sometimes topic in Arlington. Let's talk a little bit about what our plan was with the strategic incentives that were part of this proposal.
Absolutely. It's a great question, and I think it's top of mind. We saw what I only somewhat tongue-in-cheekily referred to earlier this year as silly season with a lot of jurisdictions across the nation, really offering things like, I heard the word blank check, right? So I think Arlingtonians are absolutely right to be really clear-eyed and really concerned about what it is that Arlington put on the table. You know, Victor may want to speak a little more to the negotiation process because our economic development team really was at the table doing the negotiating. The board will be the final arbiter on the package when it comes to us, likely in February of 2019. But one of the things I really appreciate about our team is that I know they heard and shared the values of the county board, which is that we were not going to try to outbid anybody else, that we believed Arlington's strengths were our assets, our people, our well-built infrastructure, and everything else that we could offer. And we were not going to come to the table with large amounts of cash. So our package is all available online. It went up this morning at a website that I imagine if somebody's watching the Facebook feed, we can have that website available to them so people can take a look for themselves. Broadly speaking, the vast majority of Arlington County's investments as part of bringing Amazon here are investments in ourselves. They're investments, about $360 million in our transportation network, some of the projects Victor was alluding to. They are investments in affordable housing, which is an incredibly important issue to my colleagues and to me. So by and large, these are investments that actually have already been approved as part of Arlington's existing commitments, our capital improvement plan, for example, our affordable housing master plan. But taken together, they represent where we plan to invest our money to mitigate the impacts and maximize the benefits of Amazon coming. There is a relatively modest grant to the company, and this is something we wrestled with and had a lot of conversations. It totals about potentially around $1.5 million a year. It's an increment of the additional money of hotel tax coming to Arlington County, so that we do anticipate, based on the experiences they've seen in Seattle, Amazon will be filling quite a few more hotel hotel
Hundreds of
rooms
thousands, yeah.
than we've seen in Arlington County to date, although our hotel market's been very healthy. So as that grows, our team has proposed to Amazon that they might see or realize an increment of that in the form of a grant. Again, really in the neighborhood likely of about $1.5 million a year at a time when we expect that those hotel revenues will be growing. And we think a pretty good return on investment for what we anticipate being about $315 million increases in tax revenue over the life of this deal. So again, relatively modest. I think that'll be the key topic of conversation with our community members as the board prepares for a vote in February. But certainly nothing on the level of a blank check, multi-billions of dollars that I think we'd seen some other jurisdictions offer. We really believed our strongest foot forward were our assets, not money that we'd be offering.
And so one thing I wanted to add to that, and I think Victor and your department deserve a lot of credit. We have used our incentives very sparingly over the last 3 or 4 years. And you can give me the statistics. I know it's less than 10% of the deals that we've done. But one thing that's very important about this and the transient occupancy tax that Katie talked about, which is Amazon will not get a single dollar unless they meet the metrics we've laid out about filling square footage. So it is a grant, but it's a grant that happens after they have filled a certain amount of space. And so that is the way we style our grants. We think that's the best way to do it. The state, I think, maybe saw that and picked it up in part of their package. But if you want to speak a little bit to sort of how our philosophy on that, which is incredibly important.
Yeah, we have a performance-based grant system where the company has to perform and then the grant follows. So in other words, you actually receive the money before you give anything out, even if you're just giving a portion out, but it's after you receive it. If they miss their metrics, then the grant is reduced. Or maybe not at all, but they have to perform.
In this case, job growth, correct?
Job growth, no, actually square footage.
Square footage.
Square footage, because that's really our issue. Our issue is square footage. Christina Wynn, that runs our business investment team, really is, I would call her parsimonious. She's very sparing with her dollars. And out of the last 228 deals that have happened in the county, really in the last 3 years and 11 months, only 17 have received incentives and been approved by the board. So it's less than 10%. I mean, it's more like 8%, and that's really, we don't expect that to change. This happens to be a big deal, but it's interesting. It is really a modest investment. We're getting back about $11 for every $1 that we invest, and as Katie just pointed out, over $300 million over the life of the project. That's pretty amazing.
Right.
Actually, I don't know if I've seen that number before.
Pretty big number.
So it's a big number.
Kara, I just want to add one thing, because I know since the person's name was Mark, it was a very intelligent question. Wanted to highlight something we're also doing in Crystal City. See, it's not National Landing, this is Crystal City, being very specific, which is that we have a tax increment financing district, and I won't go into that for, it can get sort of complicated, but to the extent that Amazon's arrival leads to more revenue being generated in that area, revenue that we never would have realized, money that we didn't anticipate and expect. We've said we'll take a piece of that and invest it back in infrastructure, for example, parks and transportation infrastructure in that area to deal with the impacts that are going to be created by that. And I said that's a really important commitment on the part of the board, because our ability to make those kind of investments was really constrained in the CIP that was just adopted because of low revenue assumptions. So we're taking advantage of that. So that's all for the public good.
Okay. Well, I'm seeing here, and as our viewers are asking their question, we have quite a few folks who are watching us live right now from Crystal City. It's their home neighborhood. And they have a lot of questions right now about affordable housing. Obviously, there's some concern about rent increases, that kind of thing. How are we helping to mitigate that? How are we making sure we have a plan moving forward?
I'd be happy to start on this one. I will tell you that for me, and I think for most of my colleagues, affordable housing is one of our top priorities in the county across the board. And that's because we've seen job growth in this region. The region's added, about 50,000 jobs a year in recent years. We know that this is an in-demand area, and we've seen rent increases go up. So to me, this question becomes, as we think about adding 25,000 jobs over a decade or more to those 50,000 coming each year, it's important because it elevates or prioritizes this question, but this is not a new problem, right? And it's going to require all of our commitments to continuing to solve it. One of the things that I am encouraged by, actually probably most enthusiastic about the partnership that we've seen from the state, is the state has agreed to contribute $15 million in additional money through the Virginia Housing Development Authority every year. So $150 million over 10 years to affordable housing in Arlington and Alexandria. And that matches the commitments that Arlington has made, our ongoing commitments to the Affordable Housing Investment Fund, to which we dedicate millions of dollars every year in our operating budget. Alexandria has a new meals tax that dedicates, I believe, $5 million a year to affordable housing. This is, I think, transformative. Our biggest challenge in developing committed affordable units, which are the ones that allow lower income Arlingtonians or increasingly working class Arlingtonians to afford to live here, the biggest challenge is the high cost of land acquisition and development. And so having that capital available to us will allow us to work with our nonprofit partners and create homes at rents that are affordable to Arlingtonians on that lower band of the income spectrum, up to around 60 or 70% area median income. Really an important commitment. I think a lot of Arlingtonians are also worried, listen, people are saying, I might make 80 or 90% of AMI, is my rent going to go up? I think it's a very real concern. One of the few things that we cannot control with public policy is speculation in the market right now, particularly in the ownership market. But I do believe that the solution is to meet the supply challenge that we've seen, to meet it as Arlington County, to really increase our urgency around looking to create more ownership options through what's sometimes called missing middle housing stock, and to really increase the energy with our partners around the region. Right now the region's forecasted to add about 21,500 housing units per year. Through the leadership of the Council of Governments and others, we've seen that number actually needs to grow if we're going to be able to meet the workforce of the future, and that was before Amazon's announcement. So I think this gives renewed energy, renewed urgency to those conversations that I know our community is ready to have. We've started them already with accessory dwellings and non-conforming duplexes as we start to think about different housing forms that can allow more ownership opportunities, at the same time that we're focused on those committed affordable units to make sure this decision and just general job growth in the region doesn't displace some of our valued neighbors at the lower end of the income spectrum.
What I was going to say is that, if you look at this, you can really look at this the same way you look at the problem with transportation. Something that has been nagging the region for a while. This is a 15 to 20-year-old problem, just like the transportation problem was 15 to 20 years. And I've been in this region for 25 years, so I know it's been around. And it has not been solved. The interesting thing about Amazon is it helped crystallize the jurisdictions to do something, because it became a problem to be solved now, not 5 years from now, right now. And I believe that's what's happening with, if you look at what's going on with housing right now in the discourse, you have the Federal City Council has put together this quasi-organization working with JBG, and this organization is actually geared to create and preserve over 2,000 units in the next couple of years. And they're having conversations right now with the District of Columbia, Arlington County, Alexandria, soon with Prince George's County and others, I'm sure Montgomery County eventually, but all of a sudden you have a regional discourse going on that never happened before. When you have an event like this, and this is what most people don't realize is this is a transformative moment for the region. This is not Amazon coming to Arlington. This is not Amazon coming to Arlington and Alexandria. It is a transformative moment for the region. This doesn't happen often. This happens once in maybe 30 years. I mean, that's where we are right now. It's sort of like what happened when AOL grew up. AOL changed this region forever. That is what, and by the way, in an extraordinarily positive way, brought in more entrepreneurship, helped us move away from government a little bit. I mean, and now we have another opportunity here to totally become part of the future. And I think that's really, the greatest part. Another thing that has come up is really education and the pipeline of talent. We have a great talent base right now in the region. You have 3 million workers, 6 million population, one of the highest educated, workforces in the country. But we need a future pipeline too, because these future jobs are in AI, robotics, engineering, cybersecurity. We need to grow that. And now we have the institutions. The state has stepped up and it's brought in Virginia Tech, GMU, and they're looking at tech campuses. I mean, these are solutions. But the problem has to be highlighted first, and you have to get that regional cooperation.
So, and I just have to say something, because I think both Katie and Victor know this. The one thing that gets me most excited is the additional revenue we're going to be getting. So we just talked about things that we're doing regionally, but I just said to emphasize what Katie brought up, which is that we'll be getting, they're conservative estimates, I really think, but $160 million between now and 2030 that we weren't going to get. And that money comes to Arlington. We will have a big chunk of that going to the schools, about 47%. But that other money, which we had no expectation that's going to arrive, can be used to address some of these pain points on affordable housing and transportation. And I don't want people to lose sight of that, which is that this is, as you said, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us to change a whole series of assumptions. We've been through several difficult budget years, and we have a couple more to bridge to where we're going to be. But let's not lose sight of that. And it hopefully in a few years will make it easier for us to make some of these choices.
I think that's a great point. And before we totally leave the housing affordability question, to add on to what Mark was saying, one of the things that is part of the housing affordability picture is the real estate tax and the burden that can have for many of our residents who maybe have been in their homes a very long time, for seniors in particular. I know that folks are concerned that rising property values could lead to a higher tax burden, but what we've really been seeking to do through our dedicated focus on economic development in Arlington County is to restore that commercial side of the tax base. That lowers the need for residents to pay more to achieve the same level of services to which they've gotten familiar. So as we look, as Mark was just encapsulating well about what this could mean for our tax base, it means new revenue to invest in new priorities or expanded priorities. It also means an easing of the burden on the residential side of the ledger.
Okay, and something else to keep in mind is that you mentioned the influx. That influx isn't happening overnight. We're not going to have 25,000 new people arriving here tomorrow. Let's talk a little bit about the gradual integration of this company.
Well, it's in two parts. One, you must realize they will be hiring a lot of people from this region, which means they already live here, and they don't have to find habitation. They have to find a house and housing. But then the numbers that we're looking at they start off like next year it's 400, 400 to 500. And then the year after that, it grows to 800, and then it accelerates after that. But it's a gradual. And by the way, when you look at that in comparison to the number of new jobs that we already add to the region, as was pointed out by the chairwoman just a moment ago, somewhere between 45 and 50,000 new jobs we add every year. This is only about 2%. It's a very small amount. I mean, it doesn't seem like that when you isolate it and you hear that 25,000, but when you look at the real timeline and you look at that relative to what is already produced, it really has a very minor effect. And that's the fact. I mean, it's hard to believe, but it's the fact. It's not how we hear it.
And I think there's nowhere that's more true than a topic where I would hazard a guess. We've got a few questions coming in, which is the impact on Arlington Public Schools.
That was my next one.
Yeah, so when you think about that gradual ramping up, the fact that many employees already live here, future employees of Amazon, they located here because they wanted access to the talent, right? They would be squandering one of the top reasons if they weren't trying to hire from people who already lived here. And the fact that, again, we know from previous relocations that about 15 to 20% of a workforce tends to actually live in Arlington. All of that means that when Victor's ACE team at Economic Development got together with the school's demographers, took a really hard look at what these 25,000 employees over 10 years might look like in terms of the impacts to the school population, the numbers that we got to were about 2 to 3 kids per school per year. not nothing, right? Really important. If that makes a difference about whether that school needs a new classroom, a new teacher, it's salient. But compared to the 500 students per year on average that APS is adding, it's really manageable. And it's certainly really manageable when you look at the 47% of those revenue gains that APS will realize. So I do think it's important not to minimize the impacts that folks might feel, and I think people have asked good questions about, might people moving here be concentrated in certain neighborhoods? What impacts might it have on the public schools? We've been in conversation at the staff level and with our counterparts on the school board level to think about that. But I do think it's helpful for framing to know this is not going to feel like a tsunami of new people on the street, new kids in our schools, or new people competing in the Arlington housing market.
One thing I'd like to add, which is that I understand the concern that parents have about what's going to happen in their specific school, and the increment that we're dealing with is 2 to 3 per school when we get to the maximum, which is in 2030. So we need to put the time context in it. The other thing is, which was talked about today, and which I don't think is fully formed yet, is what's going to be happening for education more broadly at George Mason University and at Virginia Tech. Now, I know those are institutions that cater to people who have left the K through 12 realm, but we are just starting the conversations, and I really would encourage all the residents of Arlington, all the parents of school kids, if you have ideas about how we might be able to form and work with George Mason University right here, right in Virginia Square. I've already had conversations with the superintendent about that. The opportunity and the investments for technology and partnering with our schools are going to be amazing, but we have to figure out what that is, and we really would like people's help on that.
Okay. Well, we have another Facebook question here. This one's from Carly, and Carly wants to know about investments specifically in public transportation, public service infrastructure, roads, public transit, that kind of thing, to handle some of that influx. Now, obviously, as we discussed, that influx is not going to be happening overnight, but what can we tell our residents who have those questions?
Yes, Carly, great question. This is one that's been top of mind, I know, for Arlington County, and then for many of us serving roles in regional bodies. For example, I'm a member of the Virginia Railway Express Operations Board, as well as the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. Our colleague Christian Dorsey, the vice chair of the county board, is the region's representative to WMATA. We've had a lot of conversations about thinking about this regional transportation network. The probably most salient conversation is the one we were just referring to, leading to sustained capital funding for Metro. But to get specific a little bit and talk about, we talk about $360 million that we're proposing to invest in transportation in this area. What can residents around the area expect to see? So certainly that Crystal City second Metro entrance is really important, both in ensuring that many of the future workers at Amazon's headquarters do take Metro. It's really important to us that they make good, Amazon makes good on what we know is a priority for them, encouraging their workers to come to work in some way other than a single occupancy vehicle. And so bringing that second station entrance is going to be a wonderful amenity for the residents of Crystal City, the workers in Crystal City already, and we know it'll be the kind of thing that helps those Amazon employees make the decision to use transit instead of driving alone or adding more car burden. It will also help better connect to the VRE station there. Many Arlingtonians don't know that we have a VRE station in Crystal City because we tend to take Metro downtown, but if you're coming from Fredericksburg, for example, that is an incredible asset. It is the busiest station on the Virginia Railway Express system in the Commonwealth, and it brings in thousands of people a day, again, whose single occupancy vehicles we keep off the road. You'll also see, we also will see, realized through this opportunity, a completion of the Transitway, which is a bus rapid transit system that bridges Arlington and Alexandria, as well as investments. I think Carly's question was about the kind of infrastructure around the area. Complete streets, improved walkability, bikeability, and navigability of our streets, actually making them more hospitable to all kinds of users, whether they might be on Capital Bike Share or pushing a stroller. there, for example. So we'll see a lot of improvements there. There are some proposals from the state that we're really interested in their partnership on, including potentially major reconfigurations of Route 1 to bring that more to grade and really make it easier to cross on foot, by bike, or other forms of transportation between Crystal City and Pentagon City, making that feel like one neighborhood for the first time. So the opportunity to really realize that transformational transportation infrastructure, I think, is something that the many Crystal City residents watching can really get excited about. I know we're excited about it on the board.
Okay.
And the one thing I have to mention, which is that apparently the chief person over at Amazon said there was one thing that he was looking forward to in Crystal City. You remember, Victor? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, there's been a proposal for a bridge, a really elegant bridge that would cross the tracks directly to the airport. And I think that this is something that a lot of people in Crystal City would love to see, because right now it's really difficult to walk to the airport, even though you can see it.
Yeah.
So like, I can see it from here, but how do I get there? And it's difficult to navigate, particularly with luggage. But this really proposed design, actually the Crystal City bid put together a proposal a few months back. Dennis Leach and others have reviewed it and are now becoming involved in the design, concept process. It's a long way to get there, but the Virginia Regional Transit System is interested in the discussion. Obviously, the developer is interested in it. JBG, we're interested in it. The community is interested in it, and the airport's interested. So we at least got those parties involved. Absolutely. Now you got to get the park system and others on board too. But it would be a really elegant. Actually, it'll be one of a kind in the United States. Now there are other countries that have this kind of setup, but no place in the United States has it. So
this bridge is also, I think, a fantastic example of how when you invest in things that are exciting economic development opportunities, they actually are great for residents too. If we can have more people walking from Crystal City's businesses, hotels, to the airport, that's going to alleviate one of the biggest pain points for the neighborhoods surrounding the airport, which is the traffic and the congestion that backs up from cars, or from, more often, increasingly, the Ubers and Lyfts navigating their way to the airport. Encouraging more people to be able to walk, make that really short journey from their meetings downtown, their hotels downtown, right back to the airport. Again, that's not only the kind of thing that catches the eye of a CEO, it's the kind of thing that will improve the daily life of our Arlington County residents.
Absolutely. Right. Makes it just so much easier to get off your flight, you can be home.
And make sure that somebody else isn't driving through your neighborhood on their way to their flight.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
But I think that walking point is a big part of Amazon's culture, at least the way it's been explained to me, which is that they were looking for a place to land where they could have their workers walk between buildings, and they are really committed to that as part of their corporate culture, which really matches up with what we're committed to. So that's exciting.
Or wheel. I had a great comment from an Arlingtonian today who reminded us that inclusion of people with disabilities has been a priority for us in Arlington County, and it's something when we try to build out our streets, when we talk about complete streets for all users, that's really important too for people with limited mobility.
Okay. We're getting a lot of questions right now about the process. Throughout the last many months, Arlingtonians have been concerned, some a little even frustrated, that they didn't know more about the details of this project. Let's talk a little bit just about standard operating procedure when it comes to things like long-term economic development.
Well, this was not a little different. This is extraordinarily different from any other economic development process that I've seen in my career. And I've been at this for about 25 years. So I've seen a lot of deals. This was very public in the beginning, and that normally would not have happened. Actually, for example, with Nestle, no one really heard about Nestle until we were really at the point of proposal, because we give a proposal that the board either approves or disapproves, but in that case, of course, approved it. And that is the proposal that the elements become public. And at that time, well, this happened to be, we were talking to Nestle for 6-7 months that no one knew we were talking to Nestle. In this case, you knew immediately.
Everybody knew.
Yes, that's the problem. Now you got some of our anxiety. It's interesting. It's almost like our anxiety was actually transferred to those who were watching. and that doesn't normally happen. Normally, our work is really in the background, and we're working very closely with the board. We're working very closely with the county manager. There's a lot that we do with the county manager even before we go to the board. Actually, the board asked one day, "Why didn't you bring us any bad deals? We haven't seen any bad deals." I said, "Well, the county manager usually throws them out before we get them to you, so it's pretty easy." Christina, that one's not going to make it. So we have a process that we go through that normally isn't public. And this is a very odd case where it was public from the beginning, and then it became quiet. And I think that was the difficulty. It was public and then went quiet. It wouldn't even have been public. It would have been quiet until the end, and when it was proposed, and then the public would have seen it, had the opportunity to comment, and then vote up or down. That's really how it would have gone.
And why is that everything is done behind closed doors, so to speak? In a negotiation
Honestly,
Why can't you negotiate?
Yeah,
Right.
honestly, there's no other way to do it because if you did it any other way, your competitor would know exactly your terms. You cannot compete well if it's sort of like playing cards with all your cards showing on the table. It's very difficult to win if they know exactly what you have. And by the way, and you don't know what they have, because the public process it isn't public that way. That's not an economic development. In other pieces of our business it is, but not in economic development.
But so Kara, just one thing, and I know Katie's going to talk about this. We have on the staff level made it very clear to our development partners that we're not going to be cutting any corners and looking at any of the material. As a matter of fact, we've told them that if there's something they want to build, they should, rather than waiting till they file their plans formally and we go through the conversation, they need to start talking about it now with the community. And I've had that conversation directly with the head of JBG, and they've committed any project that we will start having that conversation right away. And I know Katie can speak to how the board is going to handle this.
Absolutely. So two things, right? One is the incentive package itself, the proposal to Amazon itself, and the other is the related land use issues, right? So to take the first, I can tell you it's definitely been a source of frustration for my colleagues and I to not be able to talk publicly about this. In fact, in part because in the absence of information, there are all kinds of rumors that rush in. Right. And when we've got, for example, a state to be that will not be named out there offering things like $5 billion, I think was one of the proposals. Of course, people in Arlington County are worried that we're promising something like that behind closed doors. For us to be able to say the grant that we have on the table, again, is about $1.5 million a year to Amazon, is something we feel like this community can get behind and defend. The rest of the package are commitments that exist in our capital improvement plan and our affordable housing master plan. So when my colleagues and I take a vote, again, that will be in February. It will be after multiple sessions like this, many conversations directly in the community with Mark, with myself, with colleagues, with individual residents, and in a public action of the board subject to public comment. But it is, I think, potentially going to be on a package that, in terms of grants to Amazon, is, I hope, probably a little smaller than what most Arlingtonians worried about or feared. And the balance really, again, being investments to which we've already committed. So, I had somebody ask today, for example, can you tell me how you'll vote in February? And I said, well, I can't tell you how I'm going to vote on something without hearing from the public. But I can also tell you that the vast majority of this package are things I have already voted yes on. I voted yes for our 10-year capital improvement plan, for example, and other transportation pieces. And so those are things we're not likely to unwind if our community, based on community feedback, but that piece about the relatively small grant to Amazon, I think is the one that people are interested in talking about, and we will have room for conversation on that. The other piece is the land use side, right? And one of the things that I have said today, and really will continue to say because I believe it to be true, what has made Arlington such a strong community, and such a strong community that Amazon would choose to make this major investment here, is the result of participatory, engaged citizen involvement, and especially when it comes to land use, especially when it comes to thinking about the future of our major sectors, and even when it comes right down to the site level, thinking about the ways that a site will interact with the neighborhood, thinking about the public amenities like parks or streets that will support them. We are not going to shortchange the very process that got us here in the first place. And so we are more committed than ever to following our site plan review processes for major site plan amendments, to engaging our planning commission or civic association representatives, and I hope maybe engaging some new voices who maybe are newly interested in planning processes in Arlington, be they renters or others in Crystal City. So we won't be shortchanging that process. We believe that that participatory process leads to better outcomes. It leads to better buildings, it leads to better blocks, and it leads to better neighborhoods, and that will absolutely be the case going forward.
Okay. We have a couple questions here on Facebook just talking about kind of the timeline, if you will. Peter, for example, asked, what changes will we see in the next 6 or 12 months, 2 years, etc.? How are Arlingtonians going to see the landscape change, not change, as we move forward?
I'll take the first cut at that. I think between now and the end of the year, you won't see anything.
Right.
And I think in February, when the county board has to vote up or down on the agreement, then I think things will start to happen after that. The first employees will start arriving. We're likely to see the first submission of what's called a site plan for infrastructure for a building, actually at the space we actually held the event today in Met Park. And I think beyond that, I don't think that people are going to see a lot that's going to be very different in the first year. After that, there will be more people arriving, and there'll be demolitions and changes in our transportation infrastructure. It'll become noticeable a few years out.
Because it's important to note, of course, that a lot of the initial, moving in will be done into vacant existing office space
buildings
that's already
that will
vacant.
be renovated. Yeah, absolutely, and that's going to all happen in the first, the first phase in the first year.
One of the things I'd be remiss to say that unfortunately we won't be noticing in the first couple of years is really that revenue. That revenue will come over time as Amazon occupies more vacant space or redeveloped space. So, as much as I would love to say that this gets us out of the budget crunch we're facing for fiscal 2020, unfortunately I don't think that's actually going to be the reality. So we're looking forward to a long-run shot in the arm and a shoring up of that commercial side of our tax revenue base. Hopefully starting 2-3 years out from now, but we'll be having some difficult short-term conversations nonetheless.
I think that actually makes a good point. While we've talked, is this a long-term solution? It really is a game changer, for lack of a better way of putting it, for a community that's faced some tough economic times due to commercial vacancies. Can we talk a little bit about what this really means for the future of the county?
It's such a good question. I mean, I think Victor and Mark live and breathe this every day and can talk about it, but economic development matters, both because it's exciting and important as, on its own, as Victor would tell you. But for those of us trying to be stewards of Arlington County's future, it matters because everything depends on our revenue base. Our schools, first and foremost, and keeping that quality really high, making sure that we have some of the best teachers in America, let alone the region. It matters for people who care about parks and our ability to acquire more parkland or keep our fields and natural spaces in great condition. It matters for people who, like me, love our library system and want to make sure that our collections can keep up with demand and we can offer great programming. It matters for people who care about our public safety employees and making sure our police and fire are paid competitive wages around the region and keeping those really high standards for public safety in Arlington. Having that, again, it's historically been about 50-50 of our revenue comes from the commercial side and the residential side. And that 50% of the commercial tax base has allowed Arlingtonians to relatively speaking, I'm never going to tell anybody their taxes are too low. Relatively speaking, we do have one of the lower tax rates in the region, and that's been because of that high percentage of our revenue coming from the commercial side. With the office vacancy that we've seen, it's set that balance out of whack, and it's made Arlingtonians have to pick between paying higher property taxes or in some way cutting back on those services that I just described that we all value so much. And so the only way out of that really difficult conversation is to start growing our office side again. Today's announcement is really, Kara, as you said, a game changer in terms of getting back to that healthier balance.
Now, I know some folks were surprised when the announcement did come out after the initial proposed RFP back in September 2017 of 8 million square feet, 50,000 jobs, to actually announce there were, I've heard everything from HQ2 and 2.5 or HQ2 times 2. Everybody has very creative names for it. But the fact that this announcement was split actually between two different communities, we're sharing that announcement with Long Island City in New York. How has that affected what was put forth, perhaps how the impact that we would see? How has that kind of changed to half the project really affect that?
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, of course, there are different views that because we're in the business that we have on this. I mean, when you're going after 50,000 and it turns into 25,000, you kind of have this little thing in you that goes, I really wanted 50, I really wanted to win. But that of course is really goes away pretty quickly when you go 25,000 is really a big number.
Yeah.
I mean, and honestly, 5,000. In terms of a win in economic development is huge. As people recall, Nestle was 750. 750. Okay? That is, when you think about that, and then we're talking about 25,000, we got over it very quickly. I mean, it was not a problem. And it was more, it lowers the impact, and also it lowers really the stress on our systems and actually helps us with the transition of the opportunity. And frankly, all around, I think it became a better deal. And if you think about it from the company's perspective, they're trying to solve a business problem. And you're trying to get that business problem to match with your local opportunity. And the first thing that you have to have when you do something like that is you have to have a values match. And I think the values match between Amazon and us was very tight. I mean, that transit-oriented development, that desire for high-quality education, that desire for a talented workforce,
environmental sustainability.
Environmental sustainability. All these buildings will be LEED, platinum, LEED, gold, LEED, silver. I mean, it will be all LEED certified buildings. The bottom line is that we had a lot of things in common. We love parks, we love green spaces, we love walkable communities. So I think that was where when you get that synchronicity, it makes it easier to work on something together. So when the size changed, it actually got easier. I mean, it was complicated at 50,000, but it was less complicated at 25,000. I mean, it really was. And I think it really as far as I was concerned, that was an incredible, if that would happen. And I'm a probability person, so when this list first came out and I saw 20 on the list, I said, okay, our chances are 1 in 20, but our region chances are 3 in 20. We are like, we're like 1 in 7 now. I mean, I felt really good. But then when they split it in half, what happened was our chances actually went up 100%. I mean, you got to think about it that way. We were 1 in 20, and all of a sudden we were 2 in 20. I mean, and for me, and I deal with numbers all the time, that was like good odds. I like that. And so I felt fine about it. I think the team felt fine about it. And more importantly, it was solving their problem and our problem simultaneously. And I think that, again, you get the values match, you get the problem solution match, then you get a great outcome.
And let's not forget the incentives we put on the table, as circumscribed as they are, all worked off the amount of square footage. So
absolutely,
if that goes down, the number we're giving goes down. So that was, I don't want to say we didn't bat an eyelash, because we batted a few eyelashes, but we moved on, and we're happy with it. We're thrilled.
I think that's right. And I do think that, we've talked a lot about how Arlington or the region is prepared to absorb some of the impacts. And I do think absolutely, as Victor was alluding to, being able to look at 25,000 jobs, people, et cetera, is a more manageable thing, especially because it's certainly our hope that Amazon will be part of our tech ecosystem, right, which is growing and burgeoning. This will maybe kind of hypercharge it in Crystal City, with a lot of startups or mid-sized tech firms. So we are hoping others will start to understand Crystal City for the technology hub that it has the potential to be. And so to know that we're looking at 25,000 Amazon employees, that maybe gives us a little more room to grow, a little more breathing room with some of those other firms that we'd like to be welcoming. So I think it's generally a positive thing. And the last thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't say congratulations to Mayor de Blasio. We're and the Long Island City community. We're looking forward to learning with them, and I think we'll all be thinking much in the same sense about preparing for impacts on housing, transportation, and others.
And and I know you want to ask another question, but there's something I wanted to mention which hasn't been brought up, which was that the chair and the vice chair I sat in on a meeting that they had with senior officials from Amazon, and it was a little bit breathtaking to me because we came in and we were going to sell them on Arlington, and we were actually listening to them tell us what a great place Arlington was. And consistent with a theme, I think that they are really quite genuine about their interest in becoming a part of the community and making sure they have asked us, and we provided them a lot of information about the nonprofits we have in our community, and they have a pretty strong corporate tradition of working with nonprofits and bringing their very talented workforce to volunteer and help the community. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. It's something we didn't even have to bring up. They were sort of pushing it on us, like, we really want to help you in this community. So we're very excited about that.
Okay, well, as we come sort of to the end of our time here, I want to just kind of go across the table, and what is one thing you really want the community to walk away from today's announcement knowing? Katie, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think the most important thing is probably thematically, you've heard me kind of mentioning this throughout the evening, which is that we think the reason Amazon has chosen Arlington is that this is a vibrant community already. That we wouldn't be entering this partnership with them if they wanted to fundamentally change what it was that makes Arlington great. And what makes Arlington great is the contributions of our citizens. So the values that we have about sustainability that are reflected in our community energy plan, which Amazon's executives mentioned by name. The values of our community, our commitments to diversity and inclusion that are well represented in our affordable housing master plan, and that the board validates every year when we fund our affordable housing investment fund. The values to great urban planning and transportation-oriented development that we've seen in Crystal City, that the Crystal City community has helped construct and shape in the development of the Crystal City sector plan. These are all reasons that Amazon, I believe, has chosen Arlington County, and so we are more committed than ever to those core priorities. And chief among them is civic engagement. It all starts there. None of those plans would be possible without the work of our citizens. So I'd really like to thank everyone who submitted questions tonight. I know my colleagues and I are all looking forward to seeing you guys in the Crystal City neighborhood, having conversations with neighborhood groups, civic associations, and other community entities. And again, our public conversation about the next 30, 40, 50 years of Arlington County, that doesn't end today, that starts today.
Okay. Mark?
So the one thing that I've spent a lot of time thinking about is schools. And I will tell you this, and this is absolutely true. When we have had conversations with Amazon, we've had conversations with Nestle, it's an enormously wonderful selling point for us to say, come to our community. We have phenomenal schools. And I want everybody to rest assured, we would never do anything to diminish that quality, which is really attracting people here. And there's concern about more people coming, but I will say that with the revenue, I have this thing for revenue, and the investments that we're going to see in the community, I have every confidence that we will be able to address what I think is a relatively small increment of students that have already been included as part of our planning projections out to the year 2040. But I remain confident, and I'm really excited about what this could mean also in ways that we haven't even thought of for our schools, and the the ability to marry what is the #1 technology firm or future firm, futuristic firm in the world with our students and with our community. I'm really excited about that.
Okay, and Victor.
Well, I have to say that I'm thankful, and I was with the executive leadership team before coming here, and I think the county should really understand. The county residents should understand that the reason that this happened wasn't just because of economic development, wasn't just because of the leadership of the board and of the county manager. It was also because of the staff in the county. I mean, Claude Williamson, Director of Planning, and Samia Bird, Assistant County Manager, and Anthony Fusarelli. I was teasing him before I came here about the incredible job that he's done. Dennis Leach in Transportation. I mean, everyone put their shoulder to the wheel to put the best foot forward for the county. And the quality of the work that they did was extraordinary. And it stood out. And we received compliments on it from the client. I mean, almost all of this work was really coordinated by Christina Wynn, through the departments. And she was running back and forth, gathering information. And when it was done, it was all incredible. And I think that, you should be proud that you have an incredibly professional, competitive team that works in your interest. Because, listen, no one was changing anything for anything but for the community. I mean, it really, you could see that their heart was to serve the community, and they are incredibly thoughtful in their work. I'm a planner by profession. I did my master's in city planning. A lot of people don't understand that. So I have a heart for planners, but I also have a heart for revenue, like the county manager. And to see the departments work together, seamlessly, fluidly, to really achieve this objective, I think it was amazing. I was pretty blown away by the way that Nestle happened, but I was really amazed at the way this happened. And I'm thankful that I have such incredible colleagues to work with.
All right.
And they should be too. They work for them.
We're going to end it there, but Katie, as you mentioned, this is not the end of the conversation. This is only the beginning. How, as we move forward, can residents stay involved?
Fantastic. So one of the places that I'd love to direct people is to our dedicated website. It launched this morning as soon as the announcement went live. The first thing I'd encourage people to do is to go read about our proposal. Let us know what you think. Does it match your values, right? That's been the North Star that has guided my colleagues and I as we thought about this today, but we want to hear from the community. So please do visit that website. On that website, they can find dates of future virtual town halls. If people, sometimes it's more comfortable to participate from home, or if you're trying to balance childcare schedules or a couple of jobs, it can be easier to engage that way. For people who would like to engage physically and in person, let's have a conversation about it too. One of the best ways to come give your opinions or your feedback to my colleagues and to me is our Open Door Monday. Every Monday, one of us is somewhere in the community at 7 p.m., a community center, a library. If you go to arlingtonva.us, look for the county board, you'll find our Open Door Monday schedule there. We'd love to hear from you. And you can also always send us a note, countyboard@arlingtonva.us, just expressing your opinion, or let us know if you'd like us to come meet with your civic group, for example. Even if it's just your PTA or your neighborhood association, we'd be happy to hear from you and talk with you and share what we can and get you answers for the things that we may not know off the top of your head. So a lot of ways to engage in person. And then the final thing I note is the likely time for us to hear the proposal itself will be our February 2019 meeting. We really welcome public comment. There's a reason those votes are public. All of our votes will be public on it, and there will be a public comment period. People will have a couple of minutes to come and share their thoughts and let us know where they stand. So we look forward to this extended engagement process.
Okay, thank you all very much for taking time on a very, very busy day today. Very exciting.
You were busy all day.
I was.
You only got up at 3:30 this morning.
I
So.
know.
Par for the course.
But as Katie mentioned, we will be having many more of these discussions in the weeks ahead. So please stay engaged and let us know what you think. Thank you for joining us, and have a great night.